Hello everybody. So a little bit of background. This build is one that I've been thinking of for a little bit just because I had a couple 2LP Apathy's mods sitting in the back. And Apathy's mod, for those you don't know, was an incredibly powerful axe. It used to run last Epoch back in the early days of like beta and 1.0, and then the Harbinger update came out and everyone kind of swapped into World Splitter, which is a new axe that's pretty good for like all the things the Void Knight kind of wants to do. And so I had a couple of these lying around and I was thinking, okay, Apathy's Maw is a pretty good axe and I want to see what it can do. And I have Shattered Chains, which it used to give just general more melee damage, and now it gives more void melee damage, so it's very Void Knight specific, or at least a void build if you're playing in a different class. So there's a lot of like value in running these two things together. Apathy's Maw applies the Doom, and then Shattered Chains gives you the more damage based off of your Doom. So there's a synergy built in, and I was wondering, like, can I play a Void Cleave pop build? So this video is about the ideation of the build. I'm going to post a follow-up with the full build guide after I've completed the build, but I want to show you guys where I'm thinking at the start and where I end up, so you guys can make your own builds. You know, you guys can figure things out, see what I know, see what I don't know, and what I'm leaving up to chance, you know, because not everything can be decided up front. So let's talk a little bit about how the skills work and how we're going to make this work overall. So I said this is going to be a Void Cleave build, and that's because Void Cleave has a couple crazy amounts of more multipliers in here. One from Vorpal Force, which gives you 120% more damage based off of your bleeds, and then another from Entropic Blows, which gives you 25% more damage per time rot. That's essentially 300% more damage because you can stack up to 12 time rots. So very powerful sources of more damage over here. And then we can make it a dash to give you a ton of distance. There's a couple more multipliers over here. And then we can also get some base crit chance, crit vulnerability, and crit multiplier at the bottom. So it's very powerful. If you want to run this in a Paladin or a Forge Guard, you can run this with Fire Res Shred and turning it into a fire hit, and it will make your next fire hit do 30% more damage. So if you cast two of these back to back, you essentially get the more multiplier immediately. We're also having it cast our Abyssal Echoes because we can auto cast it, and Abyssal Echoes has a node inside of it that gives you 80% more damage for Void Cleave to slowed enemies. And guess what? It applies the slow. So one, it applies the slow, it gives you the 80% more damage for Void Cleave. It also gives you a 20% more damage to blinded enemies, which this applies, and then 20% attack speed buff, which is very powerful. And we want the attack speed for Vengeance. Vengeance is giving us 20% global more damage, alongside 45% more damage for Erasing Strike and Void Cleave after using it. So Void Cleave is what we care about, so we get a ton of more damage over here. It's applying our Time Rot. By converting it to void, it's doing void damage, and then we have flat void damage being added. So it's a good utility skill for the build we're running. So those three are the core of our build, and then our other two skills are supporting skills. So we have Symbols of Hope, where we're going Tetragram and Polygram to get all the extra symbols. We're going to go into Heavenly Justice to cap out our crit, and then into Symbols of Despair to get that 15% increased void damage per active symbol. So this will give us 75% increased damage totally, alongside the 15 flat damage we're getting from Decree of Flame. That's turning into void damage. So Symbols of Hope, pretty powerful skill that we don't have to worry about. We don't have to worry about casting it. Then we have Anomaly. Anomaly is going to be self-cast. We're going to remove the sent forward and time effect, and then have the increased critical strike chance. So this is going to crit cap us. And more importantly, it's going to make the enemies take 30% more void damage. So it's essentially a 30% more multiplier. So that's what we're doing over here. We're pretty much going for the crit cap. I might not quite be there, but I want to be close. So this is the setup we're going with here. All the gear is based off of that setup. So these are the skills that I'm planning on running. I have the boots Darkstride. Darkstride seems pretty interesting because it's giving you move speed and then increased move speed per added melee void damage. So we're getting a little bit from our Titanheart. We're getting a little bit from our passives, which I have not gone over. And we're getting a ton from Apathy's Maw, which is giving us a tier 7 void melee damage, which we're slamming on there. And then implicitly, it comes with a tier 7 void melee damage. So it's very powerful. It has 100 melee damage. That's, flexible melee damage, but that's going to be converted to void because we are using void skills, but that won't count for the purpose of Darkstride. But that will count for our damage, which will be great. So we're going to have a ton of flat melee damage over here, about 300 flat melee damage minimum over here. And then a little bit of doom stuff that's going on and increased melee damage, which is good for us as well. Because we're running a two-handed weapon, we can run Titan Heart, which is we're using to its fullest capability here. We're getting the 15% less damage, we're getting the 40% increased melee damage, and we're getting the 40% increased health. So we're getting all the lines of text on here. It's pretty powerful. We can get a 2 LP, but I put the 1 LP on here. I put tier 7 Vitality because Vitality is going to give us health because we're a Void Knight, and Vitality scales our Void Cleave. So Void Cleave has the Vitality tag on there. It gives 4% increased damage per point of Vitality. So considering it gives us health and increased damage, we want to, maximize Vitality wherever we don't have a good prefix. Okay, I'm running Phantom Grip. I'm not sure if I want Phantom Grip or not, but I want the crit chance from it, and then it's easy to get with LP, so I want critical strike chance and void damage as well. So this is going to cap out our crit, I believe. If I'm not going to run this, I could run the Doom Ring, which is Siphon of Anguish. Siphon of Anguish is a very powerful ring because it's giving us Leech, which we don't really have in our build, and chance to apply Doom, which we already have. So it's really there for the Leech. It's easy to get with LP, so we can also get a 2 or 3 LP here. So it's an alternative, but considering we already have a way to apply Doom, I'm hoping that I can figure out Leech elsewhere, Then we want Orion Sun Seal. We need this for the +2 to levels of Symbols of Hope, just because we don't have the levels. If you look, our symbols tree is probably pretty constrained. So those are other important items. I've already talked about Shattered Chains. Otherwise, we are not actually running a primordial item. We're actually slamming a primordial affix onto our Dread Banner to get tier 8, level of Void Cleave, so +6 to level of Void Cleave to get that huge increased melee damage alongside all the points that we need in order to get both the Entropic Blows and Vorpal Force and reach out into Champion of the Void. So that's all the damage stuff that we can get. We could only be saving 1 point if we remove it from Abyssal Echoes and manually cast it, so I'm not too concerned about that point over there. So this is, in order to reach our full tree, we want all of that. We're also running Nihilus. We could run Omnis here because Omnis is now updated to give you plus levels to all skills, at least 2 of them. It only had 1 before, so also a good thing over here that we could be running. And then I just ran an Eternal Gauntlets and Leonine's Helm over here. We want +4 to level of Vengeance in order to hit everything we need with Vengeance because we want to get all that more multiplier. We want to get all the more damage for Void Cleave, and we kind of want to get everything for Vengeful Echoes just because we want our Vengeance to actually do things when we're not using Void Cleave. And then, of course, getting into Bolster is super powerful for our tankiness. So we're going to be an incredibly tanky build, all things considered. Okay, so those are our items. I put a couple of interesting idols over here. I think we're going to try to run 3 or 4 of these idols, which is Adore and Raya's idols with increased void damage if echoed recently. We're exclusively doing void damage, so we can get up to 75% on each idol. With 4 of them, that's essentially 300% increased void damage, which is huge. But let's say you run an average roll, which is 50%, that's still 200% increased void damage, which is crazy. From our blessings, I put Crypt Multi, All Res, Armor, and Mana, but I might change this to, I don't know. I might, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I put Mana as the last one. We don't really need Mana. So I don't really know for a fact how this is going to run, but this is probably going to be the setup. And then with our passives, this is, I guess, the interesting spot. So normally we go 8 into Juggernaut and 2 into Fearless, but this time we're reversing it because we care about Vitality. Then we get to take all our points into Time and Faith to get that health regen and mana regen. So 20 points in Sentinel, then 78 points into Void Knight. So this is every point we can get. I'm just going to talk about the important stuff here. So I went into Temporal Corruption and Void Blades, but I might actually take all 5 points and put them into Devouring Blade just because we kind of need the Leech, or maybe Devouring Blade and World Eater, because I don't really see the Leech on our build right now, so that could be an alternative I'm making to what this build will end up being. Then we would have 5 points into Abyssal Endurance for the Void and Physical damage taken reduction, 5 points into Sorrow and Steel, 5 points into Void Corruption, 5 points into Dark Maw. Those are all pretty standard. I put 5 points into Doom Knight. This might be removed, and like I mentioned before, I'll put the alternative up here. We could be going like that, removing a point from up here, getting the 5 points in here for the increased leech rate, and going 5 points into Weapons Master just to get the bleed chance, because I don't know if I can get it elsewhere. So this could be an alternative of what we're running. So otherwise I would run Doom Knight and then all the flat damage I'm getting from Temporal Corruption and Void Blades. Those are things that I'm still debating on. Finality for the increased melee void damage, and more importantly, the melee kill threshold, because we want to, you know, execute. Woe for the void pren, because it's pretty powerful. Then singular purpose for the 10% more void damage and the 5% less damage taken from slowed enemies and 5% less damage taken from time routing enemies. Both we will be applying like all the time, right? Plus we're getting the slow chance here for our void cleave, which is pretty powerful. We're going 3 points into echoing strikes for the echo chance, and then I think 9 or 10 points into time legion because we like the melee attack speed and echo chance. But if we wanted to capitalize on our echo chance, we would put more points into echoing strikes just for the value. But I think the melee attack speed might be nice. So debating on what to do over there. 10 points into eternal form because we like the vitality and increased health, and we get health per increased vitality, so very powerful over there for tankiness. 5 points into abyssal fluctuation for the less void damage taken and elemental damage taken as void, and then 4 points taken into mortal cleave for the 4% flat crit chance, and for the buff that gives us 10% more damage to low life enemies, which is below 35%. And then finally, I put a point into Avatar of Regret. This is less increased armor and increased echo chance, but less attack speed and mana cost. So it's a plus and minus. I think it's pretty good because the echo chance is a ton of damage. So I think it's going to be pretty solid. And I think we have enough mana regen. Like I mentioned before, 5 points into Weapon Mastery just for the bleed chance with an axe, because I don't know if we're going to get bleed chance anywhere else on this build. And then 8 points into Conviction. Actually, this is entirely useless. Ignore me on that. I'm just so used to taking it because it's just generally good. 5 points into Defiance for the amount. Oh my goodness, I can't talk. Elemental Resistance, just because we might need it. And then the remainder of our points into Valor, because Valor is giving us the endurance and the flat health, so it's pretty valuable. So that's what I'm doing with my points. We need to get the 15 points into Paladin so that we can get Symbols of Hope. So this is probably going to be the tree that I end up using. I'll post the build planner below, but this is not the final build planner, right? So this is just my idea going into it. As you can see, my resistances on average are a little bit subpar, so I'm going to need to round out my elemental resistances and my void res, which I will probably do in the idle slots over here. And then we'll see how, you know, the armor and like all the damage reduction turns out. I have a decent amount of health. If I'm max rolling, I'm closer to 5,000, which is good, but it's still a little bit low for a Void Knight. So we will see what I end up doing. I'll keep you guys posted. I'm going to put the final build guide and the final video out later once I've actually done it. I wanted to show you guys my process of actually like building a build, something I'm ideating at the start, the things I'm focusing on, and then the things that I end up actually doing. Because I haven't slammed any corruption on here. We don't know how it'll turn out with that. It's hard to predict, so I'm not going to put any corruption on here. And my build doesn't require any corruption either, so it's kind of good that way. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys later.